And this week, President Biden used an executive order to suspend asylum for people who cross the border illegally. The rule is triggered when border arrests top 2,500 per day. The first deportations have already begun. You might think that Seattle's Democratic Congress members would be united in their umbrage. So why did kUoW politics reporter Scott Greenstone tell us that Democrats are split?
Democrat Pramila Jayapal, who represents much of Seattle, compared the president's order to Trump-era restrictions.
This is not going to do anything to address Republicans who are trying to demonize immigrants and, try to make this into an election issue. This is a mistake that, unfortunately, Democrats have made too many times. We try to out-Republican the Republicans on immigration.
Congressman Adam Smith represents the rest of Seattle. He said the order is not a lasting solution, but Biden has little choice.
No other president, Democrat or Republican, has faced this incredible, overwhelming volume of asylum seekers.
President Biden and many folks on the ballot would be absolutely creamed if they didn't respond to the huge numbers at the borders. So you get an executive order. Is it perfect? No, it's terrible to have to do it that way.
Jayapal
Yes.
Has a good point in that Democrats do kind of tend to run against themselves. And Democrats will never be better Republicans than Republicans. And I think that strategy ends up backfiring a lot because they're not bringing in any Republicans. They're just, being Republicans for no reason.
And what we're getting is just, Biden cosplaying a Republican. But while doing so, that alienates, I think, a progressive base. And we're seeing Biden alienate that base with this and then with his stances on Gaza and reaction to Israel.
The position at the border has changed as well. And we know that because many cities are experiencing this influx of immigrants who, they can't really handle.
I think that he needs to at least court progressives in some way. I mean, people are already calling him Genocide Joe over the Gaza issue. I think that we're not necessarily worried about progressive voters going over to the other side as much as just losing progressive voters altogether.
This is happening across the country. This is happening in Washington State. We have hundreds of asylum seekers in King County. Some and some from Angola or Congo by way of Brazil and then Mexico. People are coming from all parts of the world, and we've been following the saga of these migrants who were welcomed to initially by a Tukwila church that's long been overcrowded. So they've spread out across the county in tents and in cars and in short-term hotels and Airbnbs, some paid for with donations. There are more than 100 migrants camping right next to a vacant hotel in Kent that the county bought to house people during the pandemic. But either the city of Kent doesn't want the migrants there or King County doesn't want to spend the money or both. In any case, they're not in this vacant hotel right next door. And police had said they would clear the camp, but they haven't done that, which could be a Kent police decision, a King County sheriff's decision, and they might be waiting for the state to pay for some of this. Some of that state money might kick in July.
It's been hot potato like this whole time, right? Where if you clear encampments and they have nowhere to go or nowhere comparable to go, then they just go somewhere else,
These migrants that I'm talking about now many or most of them were recently at a park in Seattle.
Right. And I think that's one, just as people get priced out of Seattle, people get hot potatoed down to Kent. You have to, maybe they'll move on to Federal Way if they just get cleared with nowhere to go, people are going to keep existing. It would be great if that money came in and they would have somewhere to sleep.
Yeah, and to that point, I did see that the city of Seattle has housed maybe 130 of the families who were camping in that Central District Park in some hotels, and then
right.
But it's a broader issue, and this is hitting a lot of sanctuary cities across the U.S. And I know in Chicago, they have spent nearly $140 million in 2023 on this issue, and they'll be spending another $150 million this year. New York City has spent nearly $1.5 billion on trying to shelter these migrants. It's an expensive problem because we don't even have, in Seattle and in a lot of these cities, we don't have housing for our own citizens. And then there are language barriers. The system is already inaccessible for English speakers. So this is difficult and expensive. And I don't know, to the point of hot potato, I don't know what happens to who's holding the hot potato next.
But that's exactly why Biden had to do something, because the cities throughout the country are really struggling with this. And if you watch just this recent dust up, I guess, between King County and Kent, I've never seen so much finger pointing. You enforce. No, you enforce. Well, I won't enforce till you enforce. Sounds great. What we really need is a solution there, and even a solution will just be momentary if we don't do something at the border.
Maybe a public campaign to ask our many millionaires to help asylum seekers, which I bring up because 1 in every 14 people in the city is a millionaire, which this firm defines as having $1 million in, quote, investable wealth, which only includes listed company holdings, cash holdings, and debt-free residential property holdings. Debt-free, I don't know if that means they're counting people's home equity if they're not debt-free, but home equity of, $500,000, I think is pretty common in Seattle.
This is what it keeps coming down to, and we're like, how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for this? The one thing that really, really is always an issue is that we have very few avenues for progressive taxation. And in Washington, it's so entrenched that it would require a lot of doing to be able to have more avenues of progressive taxation. I mean, you even whisper the word capital gains, and there's an entire, mailer campaign that just gets ejected from the state GOP about how they want to take away all your money or all the millionaires are going to move away. I feel like we have enough millionaires now that they're not going to.
Yeah, they're here to stay.
Right.
But I just think it's funny that former King County Sheriff Dave Reichert, who's running on a law and order platform, couldn't publicly say whether he would vote for a convicted felon for president.
Right. And I think,
June is Pride Month. The city of Newcastle has decided not to fly the Pride flag, which they did. They did fly it last year. This week, the city council decided not to do it this time in a 4-3 vote. King 5 News had the sound of the mayor of Newcastle, Robert Clerk, explaining his no vote.
So if we say you have to support this because we proclaimed it, but certain people in the community say no, then we're disservicing a portion of the community.
The mayor said that his stance is just no proclamations that he took when he took office. He said no proclamations of any kind. So is he right that flying a flag that some of his constituents don't like is disservicing them?
He's worried that if you fly this flag, then you're going to have to fly every flag that people want. So he mentioned we'd have to put up a MAGA flag, or what about a Hamas flag? And that cognitive jump to connecting a pride flag with extreme politics is really telling to me.
Because you used the example of the MAGA flag and said, well, we shouldn't equate Pride Month with political extremism, I think. But to some people who say, make America great again, they don't think that they're being extremist. So how does a local government handle that?
I mean, it would be nice if people that just kind of want to celebrate who they are just in their core identity didn't have to make it a whole political campaign.
There are political policies that can flow from your support for the LGBTQ community. So some people are going to see that as an inherently political statement. Just like some people said, no, the American flag is a very political statement. There's no getting at. In other words, people will interpret how they interpret. So how does a local government navigate, or should they not? Should they just, proclaim and fly whatever the city council wants and don't apologize for it? This is your take on your city's values.
I mean, I think that people do need to reevaluate what their values are. I think people need to stand firm in their values, and I think, I don't know, there's a lot of political discourse right now that is kind of wavering people away from their values. Or, I don't know, maybe they are really showing their values, and that's a problem. I don't know.
Well, so there's no law that says you have to fly the pride flag.